Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune. This is going to be the first video in a series of guides that is meant to be watched alongside the Epic 7 Time series that I'm doing. Also, this one will be on your selective summons. Hope you enjoy it. If you don't need this guide, hope you give it a watch. Thanks for the support. Now let's go. So in front of you will be a tier list of the characters in the selective summon. Remember, it's only these heroes that are on the list, so if you're looking for other ones, well, too bad, or you might have to wait for the second season of Selective Summons, which you get after episode 3. But this one here, you get after 1-4 in episode 1. You are guaranteed only one 5-star hero or artifact, and I highly recommend you pick a hero. The tier lists are best, viable, niche, bad, and just don't. These take into account how good they are for the early game, viability, peak performance, historical usage, as in maybe a character was really good before and has kind of teetered off a little bit, but has potential to become better. Safety, as in, is this character likely to not be good in the future due to maybe like a meta shift or just a change or something like that? And among other things like that. All of that is taken into account for this list, and we will go over each of these heroes. So let's get started with that. And I think the best way to do that is just go by them by name, as I have them here. There are a couple that I do not have, so we'll go into the journal for those at the end. But the first one we will be looking at will be Aramintha. Fun fact, Aramintha is a hero I did not actually have for a long time. I believe out of all the selective summon heroes, she was the last one I actually got. Now I have like 6 of them. They're all split up because I'm waiting for maybe Dark Aramintha. I don't know. You know, they've established that they can have multiple versions of an ML. But anyway, unfortunately right now, if you pay attention to the tier list, she is not very good right now. And never was very good. She was actually buffed a couple of times, so what she does, she has some burns and a stun on her S3, a attack buff and healable on the S2, also a buff dispel, which is newer, and she also has a burn on the S1. Her kit was actually changed quite a bit to be more in line with her ML counterparts, so for Blade Aramintha, and she has basically the same viability. None. And in PvP, her ML version is better. In PvE, she's used. If you say used, as in she can be used in Nightmare Arakan. And the only reason why people use Silverblade Aramintha in that is because some people already had her built. Nobody would build her for that one fight. So I would avoid Aramintha unless you really, really like her. And now we have a character that's even worse than Aramintha right now in Basar. Now, once upon a time, eons ago, Basar was the most busted hero in the entire game. He got buffed several times until he finally got his S3, which, with a ignore ER soul burn, fully strips, unbuffable, pushes back. His S2 also has some debuffs, and he has a very unique transfer debuff on the S1. His big problem is that his base speed is very low. If his base speed was like matching, even like, let's say, 122, something like that, or so, he'd probably still be a meta unit, but he's not. He's just too slow overall, and even as a book holder who is self-sufficient in his skills, just doesn't quite do enough. A long time ago, he was a viable first pick, obviously, for World Arena. Before World Arena, he was dominant on all arena defenses until Holiday Euphine came out. Holiday Euphine was really the nail in the coffin for Basar defenses, and this was before we had things like LRK, obviously things like that too. But right now, Basar has no real use cases. I'm sure somebody can think of some like niche place to use him in PvE, but he is strictly a PvP focused hero, and he sees no use in PvP. He's just too slow for what he does. Next is the Queen of the Swamp, Charlotte. Charlotte is an interesting hero right now. She has a couple of niches in PvE where she is very good in Nightmare Vera, but in PvP, she is one of the counters to Landy. Also pretty good against things like Senya. Anything that has a built-in anti-crit, Charlotte is good against. You could argue whether or not it's okay to go into Landy with an AoE, but it does work sometimes, and she can dish out a lot of damage. She needs no crit chance because her skills are, when she has a buff, she AoEs, and she will always crit as long as attack is an AoE, and she needs a buff to do that. Her S1, that's what it does here, and the S3 is just a lot of damage. That is where the Gale Wind comes from. This gear is not really that great or anything like that. I don't even know if Lifesteal is still the way to go on her. I don't really use her in PvP. Right now, she's more of a PvE hero for me. Obviously, if I had better gear, I'd be more comfortable in drafting her. But you gotta know your spots. She's not a unit you're gonna see in World Arena that often, and in other forms of PvP, so Guild Wars, normal arena, she's not really that useful either. She's definitely more of a pick, even though she is a good unit, going to be more viable much later on into the game, so not somebody you're going to focus on early on. Chloe really has one main purpose right now, and that is to make some of your one-shots more consistent, because her Magic Nail adds a little more damage to your attacks. So in hunts that you only really need 3 or sometimes 2 members in, you can use your Chloe to get that extra damage that you might have needed. So let's say you're using like Straze, Watcher Shuri, a target, and then you fill in with Chloe for Magic Nail. That's really the main purpose she has. So quite a whale purpose, because players doing that might not even need Chloe to do it anyway. She can also be used for Wyvern, I suppose, because Magic Nail is a debuff that cannot be resisted, and it will do a little more damage because the Wyvern, yes, does have a lot of HP, so it will have a pretty good effect there. However, there are just more free-to-play like things, ones that don't cost Molar Gores and stuff like that. But if you have her and you like her, there she is. The Spirit Lord Destina is up next, and she was one of the 2 heroes in the yes or the best category. And this is because Destina, ever since her buff a while ago, has been one of the premier cleansers and soul weavers in RTA. Very powerful kit. Definitely somebody who you have to be aware of when you're picking. The Soul Weaver spot is very stacked at the moment, and Destina does have some competition, but especially early on, remains to be a strong hero. This is mine right now. This gear isn't very good or anything like that. I would actually say this is kind of bad gear overall, but this is just perfectly fine. Don't really need much more than this. Of course, you have better gear. Yeah, toss it on her and watch her do some work. So her skills are S3, full revive on all your party members. Well, a team revive with 20% health. And if they're already alive, it does a pretty big heal. She also has a passive where Spirit Blessing undispellable for 2 turns, which increases her effect resistance by 60%. So right here I have 225 plus 60 is 285. And plus the artifact here, I'm about 300 ER. Now that sounds like a lot, well, because it is. However, 300 ER is not safe in today's meta. Just be aware that effect resistance is kind of a sore spot overall for the balancing and everything like that. S2 is a heal and a push. Most people use this 20% CR push on the S2 for the EE, which means that you get a pretty nice, let's say your Destina goes, you can push a DPS up, or a key unit like a Provoker, something like that, and get a good edge that way, and the S1 is just a basic heal. But yeah, just a great all-around good unit for your PvP. Not as much value in the early game, actually, but strong enough later on where you definitely want to consider it. And speaking of units you want to consider, our next unit is also, I believe, yes, the other best unit, and that is Iseria. So Iseria is basically almost the exact opposite of Destina. Instead of being a key unit for PvP, Iseria is a key unit for your PvE. This is the one I have for my Banshee one-shot that I run. When I switch to other content I need it faster in, I switch to speed boots, and that's really all I do. Song of Stars, best in slot artifact, obviously, for the target chance. Now, why is she so good in PvE? Well, she has a defense break and a full strip on her S3, also another defense break on her S1. However, her claim to fame is her S2, which fully resets the skill cooldown of an ally. She's often used with a hero, Tamarin, and Tamarin Idol's form has a very long cooldown, but however, that cooldown is done away with Iseria's S2. Way back when he was used in normal arena for a famous Tam Iseria team, where you use a fast Tamarin and a fast Iseria, use Iseria to reset the Tamarin's S3s, then pushes her whole team up, and you win the fights that way. This was a very viable strategy. It could get you to Legend when it was newer. These days, it's still okay. You can still use it, but you're only probably going to get to, like, say, Challenger or so using this strategy, unless you're really outgearing your opponents. But yes, like, she has a lot of key features, and one of the big things is that she makes doing your hard content easier. She is basically almost essential to do Nightmare Queen. She's also very strong in Abyss. And eventually, you will get to Abyss stages where you really want to have Iseria and Tamarin with you. Can you beat Abyss without Iseria? Yes, I've actually done it. Do you want to do it without Iseria? No, you don't. Next up is Ludwig, and Ludwig, he is a cleave unit. So cleave is just a concept in PvP where you aim to take the first turn and do as much damage to the enemy team as possible without a chance for them to respawn, and Ludwig has been part of that team for a while now. Now, I say that, but Ludwig, like, on the totem pole of damage dealers / finishers for your cleave teams, Ludwig is, like, way down there. Technically viable, but there are just way better options for it. He's more of like a flex unit, or like a meme, something you do for fun more than you're serious. He can also be used, I believe still, for a Banshee one-shot finisher. So if you're worried about that, then yes, he is something you can also pick. However, there are other options for that, and those you can get in like story summon, things like that. Not enough of a wide breadth where I would consider picking him. Next is Ravi. So Ravi is one of my favorite heroes in the entire game, so therefore I always have some gear onto her. This gear isn't amazing. It's not awful gear by any means. It's actually decent. I had to take a 30 cycles off because Emo Ken got buffed and now it's on Emo Ken. But yeah, Ravi historically has been a very up and down hero. I would say that there are places where she's been very, very strong, and then she kind of like falls out into obscurity for a very long time, and then comes back after some changes are made. Ravi, however, has not been good for a while now, and she's really only here more for like historical value than anything, and also because, I mean, she's cute also. But yeah, not much else to say. She's really somebody you pick just for aesthetics more than anything else, I would say. Okay in some PvE, doesn't really excel at anything, can be picked in some places for PvP also. Kind of also hard to gear, I would say. I would say out of most of the heroes on this list, she has one of the higher gear requirements also, so not very new player friendly, at least if you want to push her into PvP. We have Sigret. So Sigret, actually, out of all the units on the list, is actually the most useful one, and the one that you will undoubtedly use the most. She is good in the Wyvern one-shot. Katie's one-shot, maybe some other one-shots I don't know about too. Just a very strong unit overall. And you would notice though, she's last on the list. Why is that? Well, because now you get one for free during the Hunt Challenge event. So there's no need to take Sigret. Anyway, why is he strong though? Just you want to know. Her big damage, penetrate S3 based on number of debuffs. Debuffs on the S2, low in 50% health. She does an S1 also, and the S1 has more debuffs and bleeding. This high damage single target burst for your Wyvern, has an EE and everything like that. Best is Rage Pen, but if you're newer, you have like the free attack set, maybe a speed set, something like that, whatever. Get your effectiveness up to 65%, and just go to town. Now we have Tywin. Tywin is an interesting case here, where for a while he was a good cleave opener, but then Flan happened, and Flan just basically had the same kit that Tywin did, but better. But then Tywin got changed, and I spent a good while testing Tywin out in RTA. And not like scuffed RTA, like this was like Emperor Legend RTA. I was like tossing him in battles in. And his results were disappointing. It wasn't like awful, right? But it wasn't good enough where I would say he's a good unit right now. I'm sure like one in every like 100 matches, something like that, maybe even a little bit more than that, he is a very good pick that will win you a match. Is that worth picking him from a selected summon? No, it's not. So, Tywin. Vildred is an interesting choice. I would say he's teetering on being a really good choice for your selective, but not quite. It's just that he's not bad. It's Iseria and Destina are so much better than everybody else that Vildred is kind of the, well, there's Vildred. Vildred is actually really good in the early game for farming for you. The problem is that now you have free spirit Iseria for free, because she's the free spirit. And he has AoE on his S3. He has hits 2 enemies with the S1. When he kills something, he does his dancing blade here. So more damage, just sweeps through waves of enemies very quickly. And then later on too, if you have a cleave team and you can budget these imprints here for your speed, you can go zoom zoom. So much later on, with more imprints, he becomes really good, and early on he's also good. The problem is early on you have replacements for him that are free, and later on you really need a ton of investment into him for him to be viable. So a good unit in both the early and late game, but not as easy to achieve those features for him. Now some of the units that I skipped over because I don't have them. One of them is Ball and Cezanne. I might actually have a copy somewhere. But anyway, his kit really screams PvP, you might think. Unbuffable, well, not buffable, decreased speed, defense break, and healable on the S3. Good debuffs on the S2 also. Does some damage. He is what I call a win more hero in PvP, where if you're winning, he does really good. Because he does stuff like, you kill something, you reset the S3 again, and cycle everything like that. The problem is that if he's on your team, you're probably not winning. In PvE though, he is actually pretty strong. Defense break, decreased speed, and unhealable are actually 3 of the best debuffs you can have for PvE. Believe it or not, there are a lot of bosses that actually heal themselves somehow, and unhealable is really good to stop that. Defense break obviously is a key debuff there, and decreased speed is really good too. The problem is that you'll have Iseria for your unbuffable and your defense break, and that's really all you need when you might as well just do more, make faster turns and more damage with Iseria plus Tamarin than have a debuffer like Bell and Suzanne on your team. He is good in Earth Expo and in Nightmare Vera. However, there are replacements for him for that, and you're not going to be doing those right away, like at least maybe for like a couple of weeks to like a month or so. So Bell Suzanne has his spots, but not that good right now. Another one is going to be Ken. And unlike a lot of the other heroes in the more niche category, Ken is actually best in slot for a piece of content. Unfortunately, the content is not an evergreen content, so it is not always around, and that is Ancient Inheritance. So this is a guild activity that happens once every few months, and Fire Ken is a beast in that mode. He can solo bosses when properly built. And when I say properly built, I mean you just have the right artifact on him and stuff like that, and you just go to town on the fights. Now, do you need Ken to do well in Ancient Inheritance? No. As long as your guild is like halfway decent, you'll clear the final boss. Even my like Pepega Global Guild cleared the final boss. So that should give you like an idea on how needed he is. But if you want to show up like high numbers and high scores on the Ancient Inheritance, Ken is the way to go. But that's really all he has going for him. The final one is going to be Sez. So Sez has had a little bit of a past here. I didn't get here he is. He used to be a part of a infamous combo called the Sez Bomb, where you use Alots and Wind Rider, and Wind Rider would proc the attack increase before the splash damage. So the splash damage did like a ton of damage. That was later changed to be after everything happened. So Sez Bomb basically died, and then Sez was basically dead for a long time. Then he got buffed, and now after the buff, he is still not really good. Now, he can be used, okay? I have actually lost to a Sez recently. But I don't know. It's like not too long ago, I'd be somebody with like Gloomy Rain, okay? Now, this doesn't mean Gloomy Rain is a good hero. No, like, of course not. So, like, single instances like Sez winning is not a indication of him being a good unit or anything like that. So his S3 is still largely the same. He now does Extinction, big burst damage. His S2 now is a passive where he can only take a certain amount of damage. And he also goes into stealth to also protect himself from taking more damage. And his old passive on the S2 was moved to the S1 and still does the same thing, where if he attacks somebody with 50% or less health, he does an AoE. So he can do a lot of damage and does have some built-in protection. So again, not the worst unit ever. The key thing that really stops him from like being really good is that he doesn't cleanse himself on the S2. If he cleansed himself on the passive, I do think that he'd actually become viable like automatically, basically. But because of that, he's just basically a more niche T-Surin kind of. So again, usable, but not going to be the most amazing pick ever. And just one more time on the screen here, the full tier list again. So remember that I highly recommend you take one of these two. Iseria is definitely the best to go, but you don't want her. Destina is also a viable choice. Everything else is really like way below them. Like, I understand it's like one tier splitting these guys, but perfectly honest, there should be like 3 other tiers, but like in between Vildred and these two. Try to avoid picking things like even like in niche and below, honestly. Of course though, if you just like a unit and really want to pick them, just go ahead and pick that one. I don't think you lose out on too much by not picking one of the top 2, except maybe Iseria, which does have a lot of PvE applications that you will eventually want to use her for. But anyway, I hope this guide has been very useful for you. Remember that the game is ever changing, and this guide might not be as, well, accurate in maybe like a year or so, but this is what it's basically been like for quite a while now. I would say since Destina got buffed, which was, I want to say like a year or so ago now too, maybe even longer than that. But anyway, again, thanks for watching. It's been a good one. Nep out.